Robert Harmon stared at the spreadsheet on his computer screen, the numbers blurring together as fatigue set in. After 32 years at Westfield Engineering, retirement was finally on the horizon. Just 18 months to go. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the photo on his desk, him and Ellen at their 30th anniversary dinner, both smiling widely at the camera. The celebration had been his idea, a weekend getaway to the coast where they'd first met. Robert looked up to see his colleague, Dave, standing in the doorway of his office, coat already on. "Just finishing up the quarterly projections," Robert replied, saving the file. "Ellen's making pot roast tonight. Can't be late for that." Dave chuckled. "You two still going strong after all these years. Makes the rest of us look bad." Robert smiled, though something in Dave's tone made him pause. There had been an odd note of sympathy there, or perhaps he was just tired. 34 years next month, he said, shutting down his computer. "I'm a lucky man." The drive home took longer than usual. Traffic backed up from an accident on the highway. Robert didn't mind. The delay gave him time to think about the weekend ahead. Ellen had been distant lately, preoccupied with her volunteer work at the community center and her book club. He'd planned a surprise, tickets to see her favorite jazz quartet on Saturday night. Perhaps they needed to reconnect, find that spark again. When he pulled into the driveway of their colonial-style home, he noticed Ellen's car was gone. Unusual for this time on a Thursday. She typically finished her shift at the library by 4. Robert checked his phone. No messages. He unlocked the front door, the house eerily quiet without her presence. The kitchen counter was bare. No ingredients laid out for dinner. No note explaining her absence. Robert frowned, opening the refrigerator to find the pot roast sitting in its marinade, uncooked. He pulled out his phone and dialed Ellen's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Just got home and was wondering where you are. Call me back when you get this." Robert hung up, a small knot forming in his stomach. It wasn't like Ellen to change plans without letting him know. He wandered into the living room, noticing her laptop open on the coffee table. Ellen was usually meticulous about closing it when she wasn't using it. He sat down on the couch, not intending to snoop, but the screen lit up when he accidentally bumped the table. An email was open, from someone named Michael. Robert's eyes caught on the words before he could look away. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about how you felt in my arms. When can I see you again?" Robert read the message 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. His hands began to shake. This had to be a mistake. Perhaps it was spam or meant for someone else. But there was Ellen's reply, sitting in the draft folder, unsent. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Robert gripped the edge of the coffee table, trying to steady himself as 34 years of trust crumbled around him. His mind raced, searching for alternative explanations, but finding none. The evidence was right there, in black and white. "Sorry, got caught up helping Diane with some emergency at the community center. On my way home now. Need anything from the store?" Robert stared at the message, bile rising in his throat. The casual lie, so easily told. How many other lies had there been? He couldn't bring himself to respond, couldn't trust what might come out if he did. 20 minutes later, he heard her key in the lock. He hadn't moved from the couch, the laptop still open in front of him. "Robert? Sorry I'm late. Diane had a crisis with the fundraiser plans," and Ellen stopped short when she entered the living room, her eyes darting from Robert to the laptop and back again. The color drained from her face. "What are you doing on my computer?" Robert looked up at her, this woman he thought he knew better than anyone in the world. Her auburn hair was neatly styled, a touch more makeup than usual on her face. For Diane's benefit? Or for Michael's? "Who is he?" Robert asked, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos inside him. Ellen's hand went to her throat, a nervous gesture he'd seen countless times over the years. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." The word came out sharper than he intended. "Don't lie to me, Ellen. Not now." She stood frozen for a moment, then slowly sank into the armchair across from him. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because I think my wife is having an affair with someone named Michael. I think she's been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back." His voice cracked slightly. "I think 34 years of marriage means nothing to her." Tears welled in Ellen's eyes. "That's not true. You mean everything to me. Then explain this." He turned the laptop toward her, the damning message still on display. Ellen stared at the screen, then closed her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen. The confirmation hit Robert like a physical blow. He'd been holding on to a sliver of hope that there was an innocent explanation, that he'd misunderstood. But her words confirmed his worst fears. 6 months. Half a year of deception. Robert thought back, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. Had there been signs he'd missed? Clues he'd overlooked? He teaches the creative writing workshop at the community center. Almost 15 years younger than Robert, he felt suddenly old, worn out. Do you love him? Ellen hesitated, which was answer enough. I don't know. It's complicated. Nothing about this is simple, she snapped, then immediately softened. I'm sorry. I don't know what I feel anymore. I've been confused, lost. And I've been right here, Robert said, quietly. For 34 years, I've been right here. They sat in silence, the weight of her betrayal filling the room. Robert's mind was a storm of emotions. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation. He wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel a fraction of the pain tearing through him. Not now. He couldn't bear to look at her. I can't even look at you right now. He grabbed his keys and walked out, ignoring her calls behind him. In his car, he sat with his hands gripping the steering wheel, unsure where to go. The life he thought he had, the happy marriage, the faithful wife, had been an illusion. And now he was adrift, unmoored from the foundation he'd built his existence upon. Robert started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, no destination in mind, just away from the house that no longer felt like home, and the woman who no longer felt like his wife. The motel room was sparse and impersonal, but Robert barely noticed. He'd driven aimlessly for hours before exhaustion forced him to stop. Sleep had been elusive, his mind replaying Ellen's confession on an endless loop. By morning, his shock had hardened into something colder, more calculated. He needed answers, not just the vague explanation Ellen had offered, but details. Dates, times, places, the full extent of her deception. And he needed evidence, something concrete to hold on to, when his mind tried to rationalize or deny what was happening. Robert checked his phone. 12 missed calls from Ellen, 5 voicemails, and numerous texts ranging from apologetic to frantic. He ignored them all, opening his laptop instead. If Ellen had been careless enough to leave her email open, what other digital breadcrumbs might she have left? It took him less than an hour to access their shared cloud storage account. Ellen had always been terrible with technology, using the same password for everything despite his warnings. Inside, he found a folder of photos he'd never seen before, Ellen with a man he didn't recognize, presumably Michael. They were at a restaurant, at what looked like a cabin by a lake, and several in more intimate settings. Each image was like a knife to his gut, but he forced himself to look, to absorb the reality of her betrayal. There were text message screenshots too, apparently saved to document their conversations. Robert read through them, his hands shaking with anger as he pieced together the timeline of their affair. It had started at the community center, just as Ellen said. Michael had flirted with her after class, made her feel seen in a way she claimed Robert no longer did. Their first encounter had been in Michael's car after a workshop. The cabin photos were from a weekend Ellen had told him she was visiting her sister in Cleveland. The most damning discovery came in an email thread where they discussed their future plans. Michael was pushing for Ellen to leave Robert, to start a new life together. Ellen's responses were non-committal, but not dismissive. She was considering it. Robert closed the laptop, feeling physically ill. He'd gotten the answers he sought, but they brought no relief, only a deeper sense of betrayal. Ellen hadn't just had a physical affair. She'd been contemplating leaving him, ending their marriage for a man she'd known less than a year. "Where are you?" Her voice was hoarse, as if she'd been crying all night. "I have been worried sick." "I know about the cabin," Robert said flatly. "I know about Cleveland. I know everything, Ellen." "Does it matter? What matters is that you've been lying to me for months, planning a future with him while pretending everything was fine with us." "It wasn't like that," Ellen protested weakly. "I was confused, unhappy. Michael made me feel—" "Spare me the details," Robert cut in. "I've seen enough of them in your photos." "Robert, please, we can work through this. We can get counseling. Try to—" "Stop." His voice was firm. "You don't get to decide how we handle this. You gave up that right when you decided to sleep with another man." He hung up before she could respond, his resolve strengthening. He wouldn't rush back home, wouldn't let her manipulate his emotions or minimize what she'd done. For once, he would put himself first. Robert checked out of the motel and drove to a diner for breakfast. Over coffee and eggs he barely tasted, he formulated a plan. He needed allies, people he could trust, and he needed to protect himself. Financially, emotionally, legally, his first call was to his oldest friend, Jim, who had gone through a divorce 5 years earlier. "Jesus, Bob," Jim said after hearing the situation. "I never would have thought Ellen. I'm so sorry, man." "Yeah, me too," Robert replied. "I need advice, Jim. A lawyer, maybe. Someone discreet." "I've got a guy. He's tough but fair. I'll text you his number." Jim paused. "You staying somewhere safe? You can crash at my place if you need to." His next call was to his daughter Sarah, who lived in Chicago with her husband and 2 children. This conversation was harder, his voice breaking as he explained what had happened. "Dad, I'm so sorry," Sarah said, audibly upset. "Do you want me to come home? I can be there tomorrow." Robert sighed. "I don't know yet, but I won't make any major decisions right away." After hanging up, Robert sat in his car, staring at the diner's neon sign. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold determination. Ellen had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible. She'd made a fool of him, risked their financial security, and jeopardized their family stability. And for what? A fling with a younger man who made her feel seen? No, Robert decided. He wouldn't let her off easy. He wouldn't play the role of the forgiving husband who welcomed her back with open arms. This time, Ellen would face consequences for her actions. And Michael, this man who had inserted himself into their marriage, he would face consequences too. Robert started his car, a plan forming in his mind. It was time to learn more about Michael, this writing teacher who had seduced his wife. Knowledge was power, and Robert intended to gather as much of it as he could. The community center was busier than Robert expected for a Tuesday evening. He parked across the street, watching people come and go through the main entrance. According to the schedule he'd found online, Michael's creative writing workshop ran from 7 o'clock to 9 p.m. It was now 8:45. Over the past 3 days, Robert had learned quite a bit about Michael Donovan. 47, divorced twice, with a string of relationships that never seemed to last more than a year or two. He'd published 2 novels with a small press, neither particularly successful. He supplemented his meager writing income by teaching workshops and working part-time at a local bookstore. He lived in a rented apartment downtown and drove a 10-year-old Subaru that was currently parked in the community center lot. Robert had moved into Jim's guest room, ignoring Ellen's increasingly desperate messages. He'd spoken with the lawyer Jim recommended, who advised him to document everything and avoid confrontation until they had a strategy in place. Sensible advice, which Robert had every intention of ignoring tonight. At 9:05, people began filtering out of the building. Robert recognized Michael immediately from the photos, tall and lean, with dark hair streaked with premature gray and the kind of carefully cultivated stubble that was supposed to look effortless. He carried a messenger bag slung across his chest, chatting animatedly with a young woman as they walked to the parking lot. Robert waited until the woman had left, and Michael was approaching his car before getting out. He walked purposefully across the street, his heart hammering in his chest. The change was immediate. Michael's face paled, his posture stiffening. "Mr. Harmon, Save it," Robert said, stepping closer. "I know everything. The cabin, the weekend trips, the plans you've been making with my wife." Michael glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the public setting. "Look, this isn't the place to..." "Where's the right place, Michael? My bedroom? Is that a better venue for this conversation?" "Upset?" Robert laughed, a harsh sound. "That doesn't begin to cover it. You inserted yourself into my marriage, convinced my wife to lie and cheat, and now you're telling me I'm upset?" "These things happen," Robert repeated incredulously. 34 years of marriage, and you reduce it to, "these things happen?" Michael shifted his weight, adjusting his grip on his bag. "I'm sorry you're hurt, but Ellen wasn't happy. She needed something you weren't giving her." The words hit Robert like a physical blow, but he kept his composure. "And what exactly was that, Michael? What were you giving her that I wasn't?" "Attention? Passion. A sense that there's still adventure left in life." Michael's tone had shifted from apologetic to slightly defensive. "She felt invisible to you." Robert stepped even closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Michael's hazel eyes. Let me tell you what Ellen is to me. She's the woman I've built a life with for over 3 decades. She's the mother of my children, my partner, through every hardship and triumph. She's not some character in one of your mediocre novels, looking for passion and adventure. She's my wife. Michael flinched at the mediocre comment. Was your wife, he corrected. She's leaving you, Robert. She just hasn't found the courage to tell you yet. We've discussed it. She's just worried about hurting you more than necessary. Robert laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. You really believe that, don't you? That she's going to leave me for you? Then you don't know Ellen at all. Robert took a step back. Ellen doesn't leave. She stayed in the same job for 20 years despite hating it for the last 10. She's lived in the same house, shopped at the same stores, kept the same friends. Ellen doesn't like change, Michael. She likes security. People can surprise you, Michael said. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Yes, they can, Robert agreed. And Ellen certainly surprised me. But here's something you should know about my wife. She's a terrible liar. Always has been. So when she tells you she's going to leave me, watch her left eye. It twitches when she's not telling the truth. Michael's confidence was visibly wavering now. What do you want from me, Robert? An apology? To promise I'll end things? Because neither of those is going to happen. Robert smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to see you face to face, to understand what was worth destroying 34 years of marriage. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Michael, I'd be careful about those photos you've been taking, the ones at the cabin especially. Ellen's still my wife legally, and those could be construed as evidence of alienation of affection in some states. My lawyer finds them quite compelling. It was a bluff. His lawyer had specifically told him such claims rarely succeeded, but the look of alarm on Michael's face was worth it. You can have her, Robert said, walking away. But I wonder how long it will take before she gets bored with you, too. The drive to Jim's house was a blur, adrenaline still coursing through Robert's system. The confrontation hadn't gone as he'd imagined. He'd pictured more shouting, perhaps even a physical altercation, but he felt a grim satisfaction nonetheless. He'd looked his rival in the eye, measured him, and found him wanting. More importantly, he'd planted a seed of doubt. Michael had seemed so certain that Ellen would leave Robert for him. That certainty had clearly been shaken by their conversation. Robert's phone rang as he pulled into Jim's driveway. Ellen again. This time, he decided to answer. Yes, Michael, your writing teacher, your lover, the man you're supposedly leaving me for. Save it, Ellen. He told me everything, how you've been planning your exit strategy, just waiting for the right moment to break it to me gently. That's not true. Ellen's voice rose in panic. Robert, I swear I never told him I was leaving you. Yes, he's brought it up, but I never agreed to anything like that. Robert closed his eyes, leaning back against the headrest. So he's lying? Yes. I mean, we've talked about possibilities, about what-ifs, but I never made any decisions. I never said I was leaving you. That's what I thought, Robert said quietly. You know what the worst part is, Ellen? Not the sex, not the lies. It's that you were willing to throw away our entire life together without even talking to me first. Without giving me a chance to fix whatever was broken between us. I tried, Ellen said, her voice small. For years I tried to tell you how lonely I felt, how disconnected we'd become. You were always so busy with work, so focused on retirement planning and investment strategies. I felt like a piece of furniture in our house, just there. So this is my fault? Robert felt his anger rising again. You cheat on me because I was working too hard to provide for our future? No, that's not what I'm saying. The affair was my mistake, my weakness. I take full responsibility for that. But our marriage was in trouble, long before Michael came along. Robert wanted to argue, to defend himself, but a small voice in the back of his mind acknowledged the truth in her words. They had grown apart over the years, settled into comfortable routines that didn't require much emotional engagement. He'd assumed Ellen was content with their life, just as he had been. I want to come home, he said finally, not to reconcile, not yet, but to talk. Really talk. And to figure out what happens next. Tomorrow. And Ellen? He doesn't come to our house again. Ever. That's non-negotiable. Robert hung up, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming him. Tomorrow would be difficult, painful even, but it was necessary. Whether their marriage could be saved or not, he needed closure, needed to understand how they had reached this point. As he walked into Jim's house, Robert realized something had shifted inside him. The blind rage of discovery had cooled into something more controlled, more deliberate. He was no longer just reacting to Ellen's betrayal. He was charting his own course forward, whatever that might be. The house looked exactly as he'd left it 5 days ago, yet everything felt different. Robert stood in the entryway, taking in the familiar sights and smells, the watercolor painting they'd bought on their trip to Maine, the faint scent of Ellen's favorite candle, the creaky floorboard by the stairs that he'd been meaning to fix for years. Ellen appeared from the kitchen, her face drawn and pale. She'd lost weight in just a few days, the angles of her cheekbones more pronounced. "You're here," she said, as if she'd half expected him not to show. "I said I would be." Robert set his overnight bag down. He hadn't brought much, just enough for a few days, while they sorted things out. They moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, like strangers at a bus stop. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and apologies. "Yesterday, after your call," she twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit. He didn't take it well. I imagine not. Robert thought of Michael's confidence in the parking lot, his certainty that Ellen would leave her marriage for him. "Did he tell you we met?" "I may have exaggerated the strength of my case," Robert admitted, "but it seemed to make an impression." A ghost of a smile crossed Ellen's face, quickly replaced by solemnity. "Robert, I need you to know how sorry I am. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust, our vows, everything we've built together." "Why?" The question had been burning inside him for days. "Why him? Why risk everything we have?" Ellen looked down at her hands. "It wasn't about him, specifically. It was about feeling alive again, feeling desired. Michael paid attention to me in a way you hadn't in years. He asked questions about my thoughts, my dreams, things I'd given up on sharing with you because you seemed so disinterested." "I wasn't disinterested," Robert protested. "I was comfortable. I thought we both were." "Comfortable," Ellen repeated. "Yes, that's exactly it. We were comfortable, like an old sweater you wear because it's familiar, not because it still fits well or makes you feel good." The analogy stung, but Robert couldn't deny its accuracy. They had fallen into patterns, routines that required minimal effort or engagement. When had they last had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or retirement plans or what to have for dinner? "So you were bored," he said flatly, "and instead of talking to me about it, you decided to sleep with someone else." Ellen flinched. "It wasn't that simple. I did try to talk to you, Robert. I suggested trips, classes we could take together, even marriage counseling once. You always had a reason why it wasn't practical or necessary." Robert searched his memory, trying to recall these conversations. There had been something about a cooking class last year, which he'd dismissed because it conflicted with his Thursday night poker game, and a cruise that seemed too expensive when they were trying to maximize their retirement savings. Had there been more that he'd simply forgotten? "That still doesn't justify what you did," he said, but with less conviction. "No, it doesn't," Ellen agreed. "Nothing justifies breaking the trust between us. I made a terrible mistake, one I'll regret for the rest of my life." They sat in silence again, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. 34 years of memories, the birth of their daughter, buying their first house, vacations, holidays, ordinary days that blended together into the tapestry of their marriage. All of it now tainted by her betrayal. "I'm not sure I can forgive you," Robert said honestly. "I want to, for both our sakes, but I don't know if I can." Ellen nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted a divorce." The word hung in the air between them. Divorce. The end of everything they'd built together. Robert had considered it, had even discussed it with the lawyer, but hearing Ellen say it made it suddenly, terrifyingly real. "No," Ellen said quickly. "No, it's not. I want to try to repair what I've broken, if you're willing. But I'll understand if you can't." Robert stood up, needing to move, to think. He walked to the window, looking out at the garden Ellen had meticulously maintained for decades. The roses were beginning to bloom, their pink petals unfurling in the late spring sunshine. "I need time," he said finally, "and space, and honesty, complete honesty from now on." "I'll stay in the guest room for now," Robert continued. "We'll tell people we're working through some issues, which is true enough. I don't want this becoming gossip fodder for the neighborhood. Sarah already knows the basics. My sisters don't need to know unless we decide to separate permanently. Robert turned back to face her. And I want us to see a counselor. A professional. If there's any chance of saving this marriage, we need help. Relief washed over Ellen's face. Yes, absolutely. I'll find someone. Make the appointments. Good. Robert picked up his bag. I'm going to unpack, then take a walk. I need some air. Ellen stood as if to follow him, then thought better of it. Robert, she called, as he reached the stairs. Thank you, for being willing to try. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, and continued up to the guest room that would be his home for the foreseeable future. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Robert and Ellen circled each other cautiously, their interactions polite but strained. They attended weekly counseling sessions where they began the painful process of excavating the issues in their marriage. Robert's emotional withdrawal, Ellen's resentment, the gradual erosion of intimacy and communication that had left them vulnerable. Robert returned to work, facing concerned looks from colleagues who sensed something was wrong but were too polite to ask directly. Dave, however, cornered him in the break room one afternoon. Robert considered deflecting, giving the standard fine response, but found he didn't have the energy for pretense. Ellen had an affair. We're trying to work through it. That's rough, man. Dave hesitated. For what it's worth, I went through something similar with my first wife. It's hell, but it does get better. Whether you stay together or not. Robert appreciated the honesty. Thanks. I'm still figuring out which way it's going to go. Word spread despite their attempts at discretion. Robert's sisters called, offering support and, in his younger sister's case, threats of bodily harm to Ellen. Friends reached out, some with genuine concern, others barely disguising their curiosity about the details. Robert handled it all with as much dignity as he could muster, neither defending Ellen nor vilifying her. The most difficult conversation was with Sarah, who flew in for a weekend despite Robert's assurances that it wasn't necessary. I'm so angry at her, Sarah said as they sat on a park bench watching children play on the swings. How could she do this to you? To our family? Robert sighed. It's complicated, sweetheart. Your mother and I, we both made mistakes. Not the same ones, but mistakes nonetheless. No, I'm trying to be fair. What she did was wrong, inexcusable even. But our marriage was in trouble before the affair. We'd stopped really seeing each other, talking to each other. It's not an excuse, Robert agreed. It's context, and if your mother and I are going to have any chance of moving forward, we need to understand that context. I don't know yet. We're working on it, day by day. Robert put his arm around his daughter. What I do know is that no matter what happens between your mother and me, we both love you more than anything. That will never change. Sarah leaned against him, the anger in her posture softening slightly. I just want you to be happy, Dad. You deserve that. As spring turned to summer, Robert found himself settling into a new routine. He and Ellen maintained separate bedrooms but shared meals, cautiously rebuilding their connection through small, daily interactions. Their counseling sessions continued, sometimes productive, sometimes painful, but always honest. Robert also began making changes for himself. He joined a gym, started hiking on weekends, reconnected with friends he'd neglected over the years. He found, to his surprise, that there were parts of himself he'd lost in the comfortable monotony of his marriage. Interests, passions, aspects of his personality that had been submerged beneath the roles of husband, father, provider. Ellen noticed these changes. You seem different, she commented one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. More, present. Robert considered this. I feel more present, more aware of my life, my choices. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of genuine connection that had become increasingly common. The raw pain of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer the only thing between them. One night in late July, Robert received a text from an unknown number. She's seeing him again. Tuesday afternoons, his apartment. Thought you should know. Robert stared at the message, his heart racing. It could be a lie, a malicious attempt to disrupt their fragile progress. Or it could be true. Ellen could have resumed her affair, continuing to deceive him even as they worked toward reconciliation. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he watched, waited. The following Tuesday, Ellen mentioned a doctor's appointment in the afternoon. Robert nodded, said nothing. When she returned home, he casually asked how it went. That night, Robert lay awake in the guest room, turning over his options. He could follow her next Tuesday, confirm his suspicions. He could hire a private investigator, gather evidence. He could confront her now, demand the truth. In the morning, he made his decision. At breakfast, he placed his phone on the table between them, the anonymous text displayed on the screen. Ellen read the message, her face draining of color. "No," she said firmly, looking directly at him. "Absolutely not. I haven't seen or spoken to Michael since I ended things." Robert studied her face, looking for the telltale twitch in her left eye. Nothing. "Then where were you yesterday afternoon?" "It wasn't a doctor's appointment." "A lawyer?" Robert felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "You're filing for divorce?" "What?" "No." Ellen reached across the table, grasping his hand. "I was updating my will, Robert. After everything that's happened, I realized how many loose ends we have. Legally speaking. I wanted to make sure that if anything happened to me, there would be no questions about my intentions. Because I was embarrassed," Ellen admitted. "It felt like admitting I was still worried about our future together, that I wasn't sure we'd make it. The explanation was plausible, but doubt had taken root." "I want to believe you, Ellen, but trust isn't something I can just switch back on." "I know." Ellen's voice was steady. "Call the lawyer if you want. Her name is Margaret Simmons. She'll confirm everything I've said." Robert did call, stepping into the other room while Ellen waited anxiously. Margaret Simmons confirmed that Ellen had indeed been in her office the previous afternoon to update her will. When he returned to the kitchen, Ellen was still sitting at the table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Well?" "She confirmed your story," Robert said, relief and shame washing over him in equal measure. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "Don't be," Ellen said. "I gave you every reason to doubt me. The fact that you're even willing to hear me out, to work on our marriage after what I did, it's more than I deserve." Robert sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "Who sent that text, do you think?" "I don't know. Maybe Michael, trying to cause problems? Or someone who saw me going into the lawyer's office and jumped to conclusions? Maybe." Robert wasn't entirely convinced, but he let it go. "Ellen, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. Are you staying with me because you want to, or because it's easier than starting over?" Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm staying because I love you, Robert. I always have. What I did, it wasn't about not loving you. It was about feeling lost and finding validation in the wrong place. But my heart has always been yours." For the first time since discovering her affair, Robert allowed himself to fully believe her. The wall he'd built around his heart began to crack. Just slightly. "I'm not ready to move back into our bedroom," he said, "but I think I'm ready to start forgiving you." As they cleared the breakfast dishes together, Robert felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead would still be difficult, the trust between them fragile and in need of constant care. But for the first time, he could envision a future where they emerged from this crisis stronger, more honest with each other, more appreciative of what they had. The anonymous text remained a mystery, but its power to disrupt their progress had been neutralized by their commitment to transparency. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, eyes open, no more secrets between them. Autumn painted the neighborhood in shades of gold and crimson, a visual reminder of the passage of time. 6 months had elapsed since the night Robert discovered Ellen's affair. 6 months of painful conversations, cautious reconnection, and gradual healing. Robert stood at the kitchen window, watching leaves spiral down from the maple tree in their backyard. He'd moved back into their bedroom 3 weeks ago, a significant milestone in their reconciliation. The intimacy between them was returning, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as they rediscovered each other. "Penny for your thoughts," Ellen said, coming up behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. She rested her cheek against his back, a gesture of affection that had once been commonplace but now felt precious in its renewal. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Robert replied, covering her hands with his own. "How much we've changed." "Mostly, yes." Robert turned to face her. At 62, Ellen was still beautiful to him, the lines around her eyes and mouth adding character, rather than diminishing her appeal. "I never thought we'd be here, you know. When I first found out, I couldn't imagine ever trusting you again, ever wanting to touch you or be close to you." Ellen's expression sobered. "I know. I didn't think we'd make it either. I wouldn't have blamed you for walking away. Part of me wanted to, Robert admitted. The wounded pride, the anger, that part wanted to punish you, to make you suffer as much as I was suffering. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't act on those feelings. Robert brushed a strand of hair from her face. We've been through too much together to throw it all away without at least trying to save it. Their counselor had helped them understand that rebuilding their marriage wasn't about erasing what had happened, but about creating something new from the ashes of the old. They would never return to the innocent trust they'd once shared, but they could forge a deeper, more conscious connection based on hard-won wisdom and genuine choice. Sarah called this morning, Ellen said, changing the subject. She and Mark are definitely coming for Thanksgiving, and they're bringing the kids. Robert smiled. Sarah's relationship with Ellen had been strained since learning of the affair, but they were slowly mending those bonds. The prospect of having their daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren for the holiday was a welcome one. Already on my list, Ellen assured him. She hesitated, then added, She asked if we were really okay, if we were staying together. The truth, that we're working on it, day by day, and that I'm grateful for every one of those days with you. Robert leaned down to kiss her, a gentle affirmation of their progress. Good answer. Later that afternoon, Robert drove to the community center for his weekly photography class. This had been one of his new pursuits, something he'd always been interested in but never made time for during his working years. Now, with retirement just months away, he was embracing opportunities to explore his interests. As he pulled into the parking lot, he couldn't help but remember his confrontation with Michael in this same space. The anger he'd felt that night had faded, replaced by a kind of detached pity. Michael had been a symptom of the problems in their marriage, not the cause, and according to Ellen, he'd moved on quickly after their breakup, already involved with someone new from his writing workshop. Robert was early for his class, so he decided to walk around the grounds, testing different angles and lighting for potential photographs. The community center was situated on a small lake, particularly beautiful in the fall with the trees reflected in the still water. As he adjusted his camera settings, a familiar figure caught his eye. Michael, walking along the lake path with a woman. They were holding hands, laughing about something. Robert watched them for a moment, surprised by his own lack of reaction. No anger, no jealousy, not even resentment. Just a quiet acknowledgement of a painful chapter in his life that was now closing. Michael glanced up, noticing Robert. His steps faltered briefly, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Robert simply nodded once in recognition, then turned his attention back to his camera. After a moment, Michael and his companion continued their walk, disappearing around a bend in the path. The encounter left Robert thoughtful as he headed to his class. 6 months ago, seeing Michael would have triggered a surge of rage and pain. Now it was merely an uncomfortable reminder of a difficult time. Progress, he supposed, though not the kind that could be measured or quantified. The photography instructor, Diane, greeted him warmly as he entered the classroom. Robert, I was hoping you'd bring in those sunset shots you were working on last week. Got 'em right here, he said, pulling a folder from his bag. Photography had become more than just a hobby for him. It was a form of therapy, a way to focus on beauty and possibility rather than dwelling on past hurts. After class, Robert stopped at a small cafe near the community center, ordering coffee and settling in with his laptop. He had been researching destinations for a trip he was planning, a surprise for Ellen's upcoming birthday in December. They hadn't traveled much in recent years, always finding reasons to postpone or scale back their plans. Now, with retirement approaching and their relationship on firmer ground, it seemed like the perfect time to break that pattern. He was comparing hotels in Santa Fe when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Jim's name. Bob, you're not going to believe who I just ran into at the hardware store. Jim's voice had an odd quality to it, a mixture of discomfort and concern. Robert sighed. Small world? I actually saw him myself about an hour ago, walking by the lake at the community center. Jim hesitated. He approached me, asked if I was still in touch with you, said he had something important to tell you, something you should know about Ellen. Nothing specific, just that things weren't what they seemed and that you deserved to know the truth. I told him to back off, that you and Ellen were working things out and didn't need his interference. Thanks for that, Robert said, his mind racing. What truth could Michael possibly have to share? Was this another attempt to disrupt their progress, like the anonymous text months ago? He seemed pretty insistent, Jim continued, said he'd been wrestling with his conscience about it. I got the impression he might try to contact you directly. Let him try, Robert said with more confidence than he felt. Ellen and I have no secrets anymore. Whatever he thinks he knows, we've probably already discussed it. After hanging up, Robert sat staring at his coffee. His enthusiasm for trip planning evaporated. The encounter with Michael, followed by Jim's call, had unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. What if there was something Ellen hadn't told him? Some aspect of the affair that she'd kept hidden, even through their months of therapy and reconciliation? No, he decided. He wouldn't go down that road again, wouldn't let suspicion and doubt poison the progress they'd made. If Michael contacted him, he would listen, evaluate the information objectively, and discuss it with Ellen. No more secrets, no more assumptions. Robert closed his laptop and headed home, determined not to let this development shake his newfound equilibrium. As he drove, he reminded himself of how far they'd come, the painful honesty of their counseling sessions, the gradual rebuilding of trust, the renewed intimacy that felt both familiar and entirely new. Ellen was in the garden when he arrived home, pruning the rose bushes for winter. She looked up as he approached, her smile fading when she saw his expression. Robert hesitated, then decided on complete transparency. I saw Michael today at the community center. And Jim called to tell me that Michael approached him, saying he had something important to tell me about you. Some truth I should know. Nothing specific, apparently, just that things weren't what they seemed. Robert studied her reaction carefully. Is there something I should know, Ellen? Something you haven't told me? She removed her gardening gloves slowly, buying time. I don't know what he thinks he knows. We've been through everything in counseling, haven't we? Have we? Robert pressed. Because if there's more, Ellen, now is the time to tell me. Not after Michael shows up at my office or sends another anonymous text. She sank onto the garden bench, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. There is something, she said quietly. Something I haven't told you because I was ashamed. And because it didn't seem relevant to our healing process. When I ended things with Michael, he didn't take it well, as I told you. What I didn't tell you was that he threatened to tell you certain things if I didn't reconsider. Ellen looked down at her hands. That the affair had started earlier than I admitted. That there had been others before him. The world seemed to tilt beneath Robert's feet. Others? As in other affairs? Ellen nodded miserably. 2, over the years. Brief. Meaningless. But, yes. Robert felt as if he'd been physically struck. All these months of counseling, of painful honesty, of rebuilding trust, and she'd been hiding this from him. How could you not tell me this? After everything we've been through. I was afraid, Ellen whispered. Afraid it would be too much, that you'd give up on us. The affairs with Michael was recent, raw. The others were years ago, mistakes I'd put behind me. I didn't see how bringing them up would help us heal. That wasn't your decision to make. Robert's voice rose in anger. You've been letting me believe this was a one-time lapse, a midlife crisis. But it wasn't, was it? It was a pattern. Ellen reached for him, but he stepped back. Robert, please. It doesn't change how sorry I am, how committed I am to our marriage now. Doesn't it? Robert laughed bitterly. How can I believe anything you say? How can I trust that there aren't more secrets, more lies? There aren't, Ellen insisted. I swear to you, I've told you everything now. The complete truth. Robert shook his head, the progress of the past 6 months crumbling around him. I need to think. I can't be here right now. He turned and walked back to his car, ignoring Ellen's pleas for him to stay, to talk it through. The betrayal felt fresh again. The wound reopened, and salt poured in for good measure. All the work they'd done, all the painful conversations and tentative steps toward forgiveness, had it all been built on a foundation of lies? Robert drove aimlessly, eventually finding himself at Jim's house. His friend took one look at his face and ushered him inside, pouring him a generous whiskey without asking questions. She lied, Jim, Robert said after taking a long swallow. All this time, all these months of honesty and rebuilding trust, and she was still lying to me. Jim listened as Robert explained what Ellen had revealed, his expression grave. That's rough, Bob. Really rough. I don't know what to do now, Robert admitted. Start over? Walk away? I just don't know if I have it in me to go through this again. Only you can answer that, Jim said. But I will say this. Ellen could have continued lying. She didn't have to tell you the truth when you confronted her today. That counts for something, doesn't it? Robert considered this. Maybe. Or maybe she only told me because she knew Michael might reveal it anyway. Either way, the truth is out now. The question is, what are you going to do with it? It was a question Robert couldn't answer that night, or the next day. He stayed at Jim's, needing distance to process this new information. Ellen called and texted repeatedly, her messages growing increasingly desperate, but he responded, only to let her know he was safe and needed time. Ellen reached out to me, she explained. She's quite distraught, Robert. I think it might be helpful for us to have an emergency session, if you're willing. Robert agreed, more out of a desire for professional guidance than eagerness to face Ellen. They met that afternoon in Dr. Mercer's office, Ellen arriving first, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Thank you for coming, she said softly as Robert took the seat furthest from her. Dr. Mercer guided them through a difficult but necessary conversation. Ellen explained her reasons for withholding the information about her previous affairs. Fear, shame, a misguided attempt to protect their progress. Robert expressed his sense of betrayal and his uncertainty about whether they could move forward from this new revelation. Ellen, Dr. Mercer said gently, while your fear is understandable, withholding this information has damaged the trust you've been working so hard to rebuild. Robert needed the complete picture to make informed decisions about your marriage. Ellen nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. I convinced myself that those old mistakes weren't relevant anymore, that bringing them up would only cause more pain. But I see now that I was still trying to control the narrative, to protect myself from the full consequences of my actions. Dr. Mercer turned to Robert. And Robert, your anger and sense of betrayal are completely valid. This is a significant setback in your healing process. The question now is whether you're willing to start that process again, with this new information in mind. Robert looked at Ellen, this woman he'd loved for most of his adult life, the mother of his child, his partner through decades of ups and downs. She had betrayed him, repeatedly. She had lied, even while claiming to be committed to honesty. Could he ever truly trust her again? I don't know, he said honestly. I thought we were building something new, something stronger than before, but now I'm questioning everything. Were there signs I missed with these other affairs too? How many more secrets are there? None, Ellen insisted. Robert, I've told you everything now. Every mistake, every betrayal. I've nothing left to hide. Dr. Mercer suggested they take another week apart, with structured communication through her office. This isn't a decision that needs to be made immediately, she advised. Take the time to process, to consider what you both truly want and need moving forward. As they left the session, Ellen touched Robert's arm lightly. I love you, she said. I know that doesn't fix anything, doesn't erase what I've done. But it's the truth. Whatever you decide, please know that. Robert nodded, unable to return the sentiment in that moment. He watched her walk to her car. Her shoulders slumped in defeat, and felt a complicated mixture of anger, sadness, and, despite everything, love. The week that followed was one of deep reflection for Robert. He thought about their 34 years together, the joy, the struggles, the comfortable routines that had both sustained and limited them. He thought about the progress they'd made in the past 6 months, the renewed connection that had felt so promising. And he thought about the lies, the betrayals, the fundamental breach of trust that had occurred not once, but multiple times. On the 7th day, he made his decision. He called Ellen and asked her to meet him at the cafe where they'd first met all those years ago. It seemed fitting, somehow, to come full circle. She was waiting when he arrived, nervous but composed. They ordered coffee, neither touching the pastries that accompanied it. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Robert began. About us, about the past, about what I want for the future. I'm 63 years old, Ellen. In a few months I'll be retired. I've spent my entire adult life building a life with you, planning for a future with you. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The affairs, the lies, they've shaken that foundation in ways I never could have imagined. But the truth is, I still love you. Despite everything, I still want that future we planned. I'm saying I want to try again. Not pick up where we left off before this latest revelation, but start fresh with complete honesty between us. No more secrets, no more lies, not even lies of omission. Yes, Ellen said immediately. Yes to all of it. I promise you, Robert, I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust. It won't be easy, he warned. There will be days when I doubt, when I question, days when the anger comes back full force. I know, she said. And I'll be there, answering every question, weathering every storm. For as long as it takes. Robert reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning, a choice to move forward together rather than apart. Ellen squeezed his hand, tears of relief and gratitude in her eyes. One day at a time. As they left the cafe, walking side by side but not quite touching, Robert felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead would be difficult, the work of rebuilding their marriage even more challenging than before. But for the first time in months, he was looking forward rather than back, focusing on the possibility of renewal rather than the pain of betrayal. They had weathered the storm, battered but still standing. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would emerge stronger for having faced it together.